it'll be helpful for my archives and the future books that I write. And any further I'm really gotta keep them unlisted on YouTube for the reason number one, I don't want everybody having the surf forecast, and two, when Roger participates, he has like a big public
Mm,
job at this
yeah.
at the Intercept, and he's now being
Okay.
attacked. So
Oh my God.
they really got to stay private. Yeah, I mean,
Oof.
any world where you have to be on Twitter all the time is
Yeah.
gonna be difficult.
Yeah.
Uh, so I've managed to survive without Twitter.
Twitter is like big for me as well, career wise. I'm like, and I hate LinkedIn so much. I have a profile. I'll use it when I'm recruiting, but I otherwise like do not log in. And I'm like, that's going to be the only way to connect professionally if Twitter's gone. And I'm
Oh, wow.
very sad about that prospect.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the world that I'm supposed to be in, like part of the world I'm supposed
Philosophy.
to be in, philosophy and like critical theory
Yeah.
cast space
Yeah.
sphere, it's
Yeah.
very Twitter heavy, and
Yeah.
also especially getting into the health and wellness thing.
Mm,
They there are apparently, because I listen to so many podcasts, and these
yeah.
podcasters are all also on Twitter,
Hmm.
um, that they they, I guess they, I'm not on there. So I'm talking about a thing I haven't even seen, which is
Yeah.
developing long form arguments on Twitter. So like
Twitter threads.
you
Yeah.
start with a premise in 130 characters,
Yeah.
and then you build they basically are writing long form in the little short. So like they'll be like, this part of the argument, this part of the argument, here's the
Yeah.
study, link to this
Yeah.
study, link to this. So I mean,
Yeah.
it could be cool for me to like just look at that. I just have never been able to be addicted to Twitter. I've been able to be
Mm,
addicted to so many things in my life.
right.
Twitter
Yeah.
is not captured. I also was never good at it right away, so
Okay. Yeah.
it didn't capture me because I wasn't good at it.
Mm,
I don't
hmm.
think in those short sound bites.
Yeah.
I am not good at I'm good at only long form so far.
Yeah.
I couldn't train myself to be good at Twitter, but I
Yeah.
never really saw the upshot for myself, which like
That's fair.
I could be convinced though that having a business that is very media oriented,
Yeah.
it would be a good idea to have a Twitter. So I have a Twitter account. I
Yeah.
just
You just don't use it.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a very good place to network in certain industries, I think, like because you're just connecting with other people quite directly, quite easily that you might not otherwise have like ready access to. Um, And so, like I just spoke at this really cool conference in Austin. Like I had never met the founder of that conference before. He emailed me and asked me if I was down to speak. But like he knew me through online and like knew that I knew my stuff and knew I was good and knew what the other people I know who that indirectly vouches for me, like so much in growth and analytics and business, like so much of it is through that. So
Mm.
it's very good for that, but I don't necessarily use it to build like an audience that I'm marketing directly to. It's more to build up that like
That
network and
professional.
cachet. Yeah, yeah. And I think it's more effective than LinkedIn. And I just hate LinkedIn so much. It's just like the
Also have
sum
a
of the earth
profile.
on
No
LinkedIn.
need as somebody who owns their own
Yeah,
business
yeah.
to be on LinkedIn. Although apparently I come up in a lot of searches according to my email.
Oh,
Uh,
oh,
and yeah, and then Twitter, it's always still this thing like figuring out audience, and like who I want to be
yeah,
interacting with. Like
yeah,
the time that I started doing Twitter was more about surf contests and commenting on the judging and commenting on
yeah.
who's
And I feel like surfers don't hang out on Twitter.
oh yeah.
They do?
And it's
Okay.
the surfers on the internet you don't want to be engaged with.
Right. Okay. Okay.
They're like the worst. It's
Yeah.
the dark surf web is really well. I think actually indicative of some of the behaviors that we talk about that we are frustrated with in the lineup.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
will
They're on Twitter.
They're on Twitter.
Okay.
Or on like WSL comment boards, or
Right.
on the YouTube feed for WSL,
Yeah. Yeah, that
or
tracks.
so Surfline disabled commenting because there were so many trolls.
Oh
And
wow.
you're like run of the mill homophobic, misogynistic,
Yeah.
you know, white dude
Yeah.
troll.
Yeah.
A little racist too, I guess, because there's a big debate in these surf spheres has been about Brazilian surfers, and
Mm.
this whole thing about whether you should claim a ride or celebrate a ride. And
Oh, because of Gabrielle.
it's
What's
just
his
all
name?
the Brazilian surfers
Yeah.
are so they're so, the thing,
Yeah.
they're so passionate.
Yeah.
And the surfers that are against claiming aren't analyzing what kind of cultural forces are at work that would
Yeah.
lead them to the value system where claiming was bad. Because
Yeah.
part of it is, I mean, I think everybody has a side, but part of it is that sometimes in the contest a person feels the ride or the move was really good, so they claim it because they're trying to sell it a little more to the judges.
Mm-hmm.
And then other times, so it's hard to distinguish between
Yeah.
the ones where they're just
Just genuine.
legitimately excited, like
Yeah.
a super good tube, and it's
Yeah.
pretty obvious, like when the tube was really deep. And
Yeah.
then there are people from puritanical societies. If you even just think of it as the difference between people from a Catholic culture and people from a puritanical
Yeah.
culture, uh,
Yeah.
the puritanical culture societies have figured out a way to make claiming, like there's like a non-claim claim. Hey, Noel, like
Yeah.
just like taking the water off your nose, or like pretending like it
Right.
wasn't that big a deal.
Oh.
So
Oh
it's like
wow.
Billy Slater's famous for those.
Okay.
He's a big
Nice.
non-claim claimer. And
Uh-huh.
then the Catholic societies are like, or then there's like the
Yeah.
grabbing your crotch. There are a bunch of them that
Huh.
and there's something in between. There's all kinds of things in between. Andy Irons, who is no longer on Earth, had this really famous one from Chopu where he did this like gun shooting
Oh.
one. Yeah, so that there's a lot on the surface sphere.
Yeah.
There's a lot about yeah, there was a lot of talking about the different female surfers and their bikinis.
Mm.
We were talking about Twitter, Noel, when we started this
Okay.
conversation. And with the surf,
And then we got into like the negative surf culture online.
yeah, which is on there, because I was basically talking about how I've never known how to like be on Twitter. And then I feel like in the intellectual sphere, like philosophers that are on Twitter are just the ones that are on there are so good at it and they're so witty. And it takes me so long to think of something that
It's like a full-time job to be on Twitter to me. I don't know how people do it, and there are other things.
it is I mean, it's part of their full-time jobs, I
I
think.
guess that's true, yeah. But like now we're just watching like Nero just like do whatever, and like Twitter just like crumble. Like it's
Oh, with the
Yeah.
Elon Musk. Oh, yeah.
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 Every morning I'm like, is it still here? Oh, it's still here. Okay, great.
like wild.
Yeah, I heard a really good podcast there's that Acid Horizon podcast I listened to, and they were talking about the libidinal economy of Twitter and the different platforms, that the social media platforms that we use. And that really spoke to me because like I totally understand the libidinal economy of Instagram, and these guys were not talking about it in this like way that they were above it, that they didn't participate in the libidinal economy. They're very much active on Twitter. And one of the guys was saying how, yeah, he feels this like surge of self-worth when people respond to his tweets, and when
Yeah.
it starts a commentary, and when he feels that like his words are being heard.
Yeah.
So then he'll go back to that source, go back to that libidinal economy to
Yeah.
keep getting this pleasureful feeling, right? So that's
Yeah.
something we can maybe even
Well, that's like all social, right? Like you just get
And
like addicted to the like high of
Yeah.
people being interested in you.
right. And that's
Yeah.
how they make money.
Yeah.
Like that's the business model.
That is, yes,
That's the
you are
business model.
the product being
Yeah.
sold.
Exactly.
I think we can actually rope this back in to our discussion of the text, but let's do the forecast really quick just because I want to
Yeah.
I want to get in touch with it. And it's been, like I wrote, like a really awesome thing to do to start these things off. So wind finder. Oh wow, it has been crazy for it to be this flat. It feels like there were never-ending waves at this point.
This is my first experience of a fall, so I was like, oh, I guess it's really to me like that's the norm.
So this is actually, we should start checking the buoys more regularly once we start seeing this southwesterly pattern. So let's just start with that, like we started with this, but we'll go here.
Also, they have been dumping sand in the 60s
I
for like
know.
3 days now. The jetties are
I know.
almost underwater. There are going to be no waves breaking there.
Yeah, I know. I
It's
know.
really sad.
I know. We had a run. We had a good run.
Yeah.
MG
I'm
texted
like,
me.
oh my God, it's gonna take so long for all that sand to wash back out.
Okay, so this is a surfable swell. So it's worth checking the buoy again in the morning. 5.2 at 5 from the southwest is not a great direction. We'll have to tap into the local wind forecast. We'll see what 44025 is doing right now. So we got 5.6 at 16 from the, so this one has this little local wind swell, the 5.6. This is not a swell, 0.3 at 16 from the northeast. I mean, it is a swell, but like it's not a surfable thing. If anything is surfable, it's this very like low period wind thing from all the southwest that we've been getting. So that's really worth watching. And that just came up on my radar just by looking like, oh wow, this storm has just kind of swung enough that we could get some. Southwest is not a great direction. It's what we would call super steep, like that. But
Yeah.
we will, when there are sandbars, get little waves from that. So I just actually want to look at local winds right now. So do the forecast just a little differently with that.
About like 2 hours ago, the wind turned slightly onshore for a bit. It's been this like west wind all week, and then which my balcony is protected from the west wind, and then all of a sudden the wind started coming like onshore a bit. So it might be turning.
You know, it's kind of worth like checking the surf tomorrow. Like it's kind of worth waking up and checking if that southwest swell is still on the buoys. These are lighter winds, at least for the morning. And the west in it's not like the best for Long Beach, but it's definitely worth considering checking the surf over there. I don't think I would go to the 60s right now with the picture MG just sent me, but
oh yeah, they're like fully, it's a full construction zone. You like can't get in there at all.
what's going on in the 90s?
I don't know. I haven't been that way in a few days. Went on Friday, they were like high 90s was fine. In the 80s, they were working.
Well, Long Beach, not that far away. Worth checking. I mean, light winds and could be like a little, this is why, you know, we check the forecasts. We'll just check surf line against our read here. See, the swell came up on the surf line. It's saying poor. But 2.5 at 6 from the south southwest is they have different winds than you know, then so tomorrow could be sneaky, could have a little wave, judging by this. Let's see. So now we'll go back to Windfinder, look at a larger time span. So yeah, tomorrow could have like could be one of those days nobody's doing what we're doing right here, and not seeing that this energy will create something surfable. I've seen it before. So then by the morning, the wind, it pushes it off, but it could create a small wave, and then, moves into this pattern of flatness. But still, even just having this tiny, tiny little bit of energy, these days that are forecasted to be bad. Wednesday, Wednesday, it looks pretty flat, but there was southwest energy, and these winds that are coming off are light right now. So it is definitely worth checking the buoys the night before, or the morning you wake up at like 5 and just like, is that worth like looking around? Thanksgiving is looking flat. Yeah, Thanksgiving's looking flat. And then the Friday of after Thanksgiving, this little energy starts to pick up. Huge storm in the Atlantic. It's not going to affect us. And then there's this little bit of energy, nothing as big as it looked last week when we did this. There's the storm. It looks like it's going to get sucked. It's coming more off the coast now. And yeah, this thing that was supposed to be big for Saturday is does not have as favorable of a direction as it once did. I'm just going to switch to Sunday. This is starting to look more favorable. But yeah, it's wild. Sunday, what does this thing do? That could create some waves for Monday before it switches to push it off. But here's the thing that would have created the waves, and then it comes off the coast again. So Monday could have a wave. And Tuesday, that's about as far out as it goes. But let's go back to Surfline.
For Long Beach, sorry, I forgot which. Oh, you just do Nassau, Queens County?
Oh yeah, look, they're showing the little thing on Monday here. And the weekend's worth monitoring as well. I don't know how they're seeing any of this. Is all lies at this point.
There are spots for Long Beach on Surfline. Like
yeah. They changed.
Just go to the map and then
so they
you'll see
changed
them.
Rockaways too. So there's nearby spots, and here you have Lincoln Boulevard.
There's a camera at 110 now too. I just saw.
They're just calling it all Rockaways now.
Yeah.
So they're saying it's the same. So basically, Long Beach is just the same forecast. I look at Rockaway to mean the whole entire area.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a possibility for Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then like I said, tomorrow they're saying poor, and it could be flat. It very well could be, but there also could be waves. And because it's not going to be this wind, and then it's not going to be that. It's this southwest wind swell. Yeah. And the issue is the tide is super high first thing in the morning, but yeah.
Where it's good at high tide these days, anywhere.
quickly dropping southwest wind swell. High tide likely kills leftovers in the morning. So I mean, their report is not bad. Morning outgoing tide is the best chance to surf, if there is anything to surf.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things, you'd have to see it and be there when that happens.
If anyone wants a pick in the morning, let me know. The 60s.
Yeah, I might ride around in the morning and look at stuff. Why not? Let's look at the local weather again. Just look at the temps.
The water's still warm, right?
Yeah, the water. We should look at that on the buoy, actually. Okay, so it's cold.
Yeah.
High 40s, it's okay. A little warmer on Wednesday. A lot warmer on Thanksgiving.
Thursday, yeah.
And then a lot warmer on Friday. This rain
Yeah.
could make some surf.
Nice.
And then pretty mild on Saturday. Oh, well, Sunday looks terrible, but there could be a wave in New Jersey, or there with this wind, there could be a wave like at Manasquan. And yeah, the next day, Monday, there's probably something to surf. Also, again, New Jersey or any, like, this is really bad wind for Long Beach if this ends up holding. So maybe the 90s or 100s or something like that. Yeah, so that's the surf forecast. And then I did decide to go to California because I have so many points
Nice.
that I got the look at the waves. Oh my God. And that's what it looks like there. So that's why I'm going.
Nice.
Wow.
Are you doing the 2nd to 6th?
Yeah.
Nice.
Cool.
And that got downgraded. It's smaller, but there's gonna be plenty of surf. I mean, we'll see whether this really is gonna be this small, but even at this small, you could surf in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So it looks like, yeah, who knows if this is even the case. Then it's kind of it's still, that's kind of far away. So this doesn't even go that far, you know. So there's no way to tell really. A storm could form in the Aleutians whenever, or I could go when it's small and that's what it is, but there'll still be something to surf out there.
And sunshine.
Yeah, it's nicer time of year. I mean, the water temps, oh yeah, let's look at the water temps really quick.
My Portuguese friends like are refusing to believe that it's this warm. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's warmer than when I was there in August. Like, and they just like,
Yeah.
it's like this gap. They just
Yeah.
like refuse to believe.
It's
Yes.
also like telling people in California, like, we surf in swimsuits in the summer.
Yeah.
It's 55 degrees water. So yeah,
Oh, it's cooling off. Okay.
but that's the same as, that's warm though. I mean,
I
that's
know,
like,
but it was like 60 for like 2 months.
that's true. 56.8. But still, that's like,
Yeah.
it's not 30.
Yeah.
So, all
I
right.
went for a paddle on Saturday in a 4.3 and it was still fine, but starting to feel a little cool.
Saturday.
It was like, looked to be the least windiest day of the week. So I just went and paddled on the west wind treadmill. It's like paddle west, drift back,
cool.
paddle west, drift back.
That's cool. That's awesome. I've just, yeah, it's been flat since last Wednesday, so
Yeah, that's
almost
Yeah.
almost a week. But yeah, I mean, Noelle, you should be stoked. You got out there the last day there were waves.
Yeah. I was too hot in my 4.3. Ultimately.
Saturday was the first day that I wasn't like hot.
Okay.
But the wind was very strong. Like it was painful to face the wind on your face.
You guys, excuse me. I'm gonna go to the bathroom really quickly.
Okay.
Like, I'm going to Malibu or to California. I don't know, to LA, like,
Yeah.
but for non-surf reasons. And I'm just like,
Okay.
oh, if there's stuff, then
Yeah.
we'll go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did a little West Coast trip in September.
Oh,
It was
cool.
fun. Yeah.
I like know nothing. I've only been to California like twice in my life. Like I've been to LA like for 24 hours. That's it.
Yeah.
Zero. I actually have like negative like associations with LA. So
My thing with LA is like nobody eats there. Like anytime I'm going like for meals with people, I'm like, I feel like an ogre. Like well, it'll be like post surf, and I'm like, I need to fuel, and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the person I'm with is just like picking at a muffin that they don't finish, and I'm like,
no, not okay. That's like,
I'm like, maybe they legitimately burn fewer calories here because they drive everywhere and they're actually
Right.
less hungry. Like, I don't know what's going on.
yes.
LA. So I haven't been down like
Yeah.
south of LA, like Huntington and that stuff, but more like Venice, Santa Monica, like all
Yeah.
that is like, I don't know. It's a lot of closeouts on the
Okay.
breaks there. Like Venice has this one jetty that like sometimes isn't closeouts.
Okay.
Oh yeah, LA, the
And
waves suck.
sometimes off the
Yeah.
pier it's okay, although it can be like really chaotic. Most people drive up to
Yeah.
like Sunset or Topanga, which are like,
It's dirty, but honestly, El Porto is fine. It's
oh, okay, I don't know that one.
it's I had a good time there. I did a retreat to LA once and we just surfed. We stayed in Airbnb like right at El Porto and
Oh,
just
cool.
surfed at beach break the whole
Yeah,
time. And it was totally
yeah,
sensible. And
cool.
Californians
Yeah,
can be a little snobby about waves. So like
yeah,
that's what I'm hoping to. Like if my trip's a little bit small, we're in the Monterey Bay and we can just go to Big Sur. There's a bunch of breaks that are like more exposed that'll be getting like any kind of bit of swell.
yeah,
And then if it just happens to be flat there and pumping here, I'll be bummed. But that's the like
yeah,
that's
Risk.
that's the risk.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
it's always the risk because it's just unless you want to, unless you really want to go like strike like when there's a swell, like book your ticket like on the day.
last minute, yeah.
Right.
Probably costs a fortune.
It's expensive.
Yeah. I'm going
Um,
for non-surf. Like I just
yeah,
happened to be going
yeah.
for a change of scenery. And then I was like, but if
Yeah, I've never gone for surf, but I've been like, oh, I'm on the West Coast, so
yeah,
I'll add on. I paddled in September when I was there. I paddled out at Surf Rider one day just to like experience it. I did not like surf at all. There were about 100 people in the water and the same 10 aggro dudes catching every wave and dropping in on each other.
nice.
Very chaotic. And then like 90 people just like floating, trying to get any leftovers, but like they never miss. They ride every wave the whole way in. But it's pretty cool to see. It's like a very pretty looking wave from the shoulder.
Great. Cool.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Oh man.
In my just so you guys know, in the Greek English version, there are two, and I'm on to the second book. So the first five books are in the first one.
Oh, okay.
I'm into the second book, which strangely the pages are thicker, but I don't know, maybe like a different pressing of it or something. I don't know. So like a lot of the books that we have read in this work, it kind of starts somewhere that and goes somewhere you don't like really expect it to go. it's it doesn't like necessarily. This one actually maybe is a little bit more in line as it begins with the book that precedes it, kind of, so the way that I took it to be was the last one ended with like talking about like what is a philosopher and distinguishing philosophers from sophists.
Mm-hmm.
And this one is going to like drive that theme even more. And Socrates kind of lays his cards out on the table like more transparently. He's like, okay, yes, they all have to be philosophers, but not just any old philosophers, real ones, like the real kind. And so now we're going to discuss like what makes a real philosopher and like what are the qualities of a person that would be a real philosopher. So again, like this is in the overarching context of justice, and we have been talking a lot about using the right categories and being able to tell the difference between appearing and being, so how something actually is versus how it seems to be. And then what kind of faculties. So we've also, like, so they've done this thought experiment, building the city in speech to see like if you could even, on what premises or on what grounds you could build a just city. and they've developed this communistic society with this guardian class that has children, wives and husbands and children in common in this confusing way, so nobody knows who their child is, where you only date according to like odd numbered years, so you don't practice incest, which is something we haven't really gotten into, but it is an interesting, there are some societal, there's some human cultural taboos which have been around for so long, they seem pretty obvious to us, but like they're not obvious to all cultures across all times. And the Greco-Roman incest taboo is maybe something that we've inherited from them. A lot of cultures do have taboos against incest, but not all cultures. The Hawaiian culture did not have an incest taboo. The Egyptian culture, or the incest taboos are different in different cultures. Let's just say, like, to consolidate aristocratic bloodlines, brother and sister pairing is pretty common. First cousin pairing also, like, not even considered incest in many cultures. But then the generational one is the one that is the most taboo. Obviously mothers and sons and fathers and daughters and grandparents and grandchildren being more taboo. So that's not what the past chapter was more about sexual taboos, but that's definitely one that is just assumed, the incest taboo. And it's kind of assumed, interestingly, just as we're going to have some, if we're going to have this communistic society where nobody knows who their parents are and nobody knows who their children are, we still have to observe the incest taboo somehow. And so that's where that little thing came from. And so that's in book 5, which ends talking about what a philosopher is. And now we have to really figure out who the real philosopher is. And we're going to get there by way of parable, more nautical references, which I think is nice for us surfers. And we're going to start by finding the true ship captain, which I think is a really nice, I was thinking about it and I'm like, this is such a good metaphor for outlining the stakes of this person knowing their shit. Because literally we don't, like, I've written about this before in newsletters, like different teloi. So telos capital T and telos little t. So for achieving telos little t, like getting the cargo to the port, like the purpose of a boat is to get the cargo from one place to another. That's regardless of whether it was stolen, like purchased above board, whatever. But you don't want, also there's lots of sailors on the ship who like have children and wives and husbands and things like that. So you not only have whatever cargo you're carrying, but you also have human lives. So there's a lot weighing on the captain's shoulders to get the ship to port. And if you have, and so you want a captain that like knows his shit. Knowing his shit would be studying the weather and the climate, and the stakes are really high for him to be like a pretend captain. That's not the North Star.
Yeah. I thought the comment about like if someone like the real captain, people would be like, you're just a stargazer. And I'm like, oh, it's almost that metaphor, like it almost works outside of that specific example. Like just, oh yeah, you're just like staring at the stars versus like understanding the like knowledge and like importance of what someone's doing or thinking about.
Right. And yeah, the boat, and if everybody in the boat, like also if he's a good captain, right, he'll be able to keep the crew in line enough to get everybody to do their individual job enough, right? Sufficiently to get the boat to port and to save all of their lives. But, you know, mutiny on ships is also a very pervasive theme and actual real historical occurrence that is, you know, I'm not sure how much mutiny happens on ships anymore, but there is still piracy, which is not the same as mutiny. Because mutiny is actually when the crew turns against the captain.
Yeah.
So, but
piracy is like super, it's like constant. Like I was in Greece and like on an island and they were like, our enemy is the Turkish, Venice and the pirates. Like they were like really like people giving us tour like contemporary like
you know, piracy is very real.
Yeah.
Piracy has not stopped being a thing throughout
Yeah.
throughout all seafaring human history.
Yeah.
If there's a sea and there are boats, there will be pirates.
Yeah.
And that has to do with the, you know, the legal nebulousness of the ocean, you know, and we deal with that in our own way and as surfers. I mean, I would say that boats out in the middle of the sea deal with it more than we do. Like we have like the baby version, which is like, we're just off of the land, you know? So we have this kind of, I was talking to my friend about it on the phone today. And I think a lot about it, obviously, because we have this like shifting politics out there, which is different depending on the different people who are in the water at any given time, where you can have more and less like ideal political situations in a given surf session. And then certain spots have more ideal, like they're more ideal more of the time based upon the people that surf there and the way that they interact with one another and the way that they agree to agree or disagree or agree to take their turns and not take their turns or acknowledge one another's presence, not acknowledge another's, like the level of training that they've had, the level of education, surf education of all of the different actors. But then even in a case where, let's say the level of proficiency among the actors is higher in the sense that they all like are technically better at surfing, meaning that everybody can, let's say, stand and go. If they're not all like in line with like acknowledging and respecting one another, it can be more chaotic, you know? So like that's the case when there's like a level, when there are a lot of male intermediates out at a given break, you know, and they're all just good enough to like get in each other's way, but they're not good at the political part, which is communicating with one another and acknowledging one another, acknowledging their own defense systems or apologizing when they did a bad thing, or, you know, a lot of social niceties aren't present. And then there's all kinds of different mixed versions, right? Which is interesting, all kinds of shadings between those things. And for the most part, we're all as a community figuring it out together. But we surf, we don't, when we go in the sea, wherever we're surfing, it's also depending on the place that we're doing the surfing, it's more and less connected to the laws of the land where the surf break is. So in a place like New York, for example, like if somebody's going to, which I unfortunately have to worry about, like physically threaten you or physically threaten you or like verbally assault you or whatever kind of assault they want to do, you can call land authorities like the police to settle the surf dispute. But if you're like in the middle of nowhere in like Tasmania or whatever, New Zealand, like it can't be settled that way. So it has to be settled through one-on-one human diplomacy or violence, as the case may be. And that just shifts place to place. Like each different place has its own way and relationship to the land politics, which, and then to larger global politics, right? Like if you, if a surf, you know, I mean, like there can be breaks, let's say in the United States, where there's a bunch of white surfers that don't like people with dark skin, or a bunch of, or in some other place of the world where a bunch of surfers, you know, let's say that have dark skin, like really don't like white people, like, and they can have those markers, you know, those external markers of difference that you just see that. You don't need to see anything about their surfing in order for there to be friction, or ideas that women can't surf and women shouldn't be in the water, you know, that could exist somewhere just as much as it could exist that places are more welcoming to women and prefer to have them in the water. So it's just interesting to see the way that those things shift, and there's no like, for the most part, there's no like radical regulation of it, because it's pretty liminal, even though it's connected to land laws. And hence, like, the thing, this got me thinking too, like the stakes, I wrote, the stakes are lower for any individual surfer, like in terms of like, not everybody's the captain of the ship, but everybody's the captain of their own ship. Right? So you're not like, but we are differently set up in terms of like those of us that have more and less power over other people and more or less influence over other people. So like, not only does the captain of the ship have to be the captain of his own ship, but he does have to get the ship and the sailors and the cargo to the port. So he not only has to be good at the weather and knowing how to steer a ship and knowing things about, let's say it's a ship with engines, which this wouldn't have had, like even more politically in this day and age, the captain was way more of a political leader, because the power of the ships wasn't even wind sometimes, or it was part wind and like a bunch of slaves down in the bottom rowing. So you have to like somehow convince those guys that it's in your best interest to row.
Have you seen The Terror? Sorry, as an aside, or well, related, because it's about a ship. I mean, it's like, it just illustrates a lot of these dynamics really well, but it's just season 1 is about the Franklin expedition.
Oh, cool.
Like in Northwest. So it's like, I mean, if you read there's no like suspense, because if you like know what happens, then but it's like very gruesome, and it's like so there's like a supernatural element, but that doesn't take away, but like all the underlying facts are completely true. So there's like lots of,
what's it called?
The Terror, but it's just the first season, because the second season is something else, but it all takes place in a ship, and it actually does really just illustrate that point of like the captain is a political leader, and like there was like attempts at mutiny, and there's like distrust. There's also like, there's just a lot of there's a diving portion too, which is like crazy, and it's like the old diving suits are like bonkers. But anyway, it's just really good at illustrating the ship.
Well, because the ship is like this petri dish.
Right.
It's a political petri dish. You're literally taking humans. It's a moving island.
Yeah.
And it does have, I mean, I think that for the example, this political example, is that there is a little telos, always. Keep the people alive and get to the next place. Like, you know, with the scientific expeditions, it's like, just thinking of Captain Cook now, and it's like, either you see the eclipse at this latitude and longitude and you get there at the right time to see the eclipse, or you didn't get there at the right time, and why didn't somebody's responsible for that? Either the powers of nature were too great, your powers of observation were too little, the ship didn't get along, the people in the ship didn't get along enough to get the ship, you know. So there's this like huge level of cooperation for any ship, except for, you know, nowadays we do have individual sailors sailing around in their little boats, but then the stakes are lower. You know, somebody loves them and they could lose their loved one. But like, there's that famous surf traveler sailor woman, Liz Clark, who is truly amazing. But if she crashes and dies, like, the world loses her and her cat, which is like really sad, but it's not a crew of people. And it's, she also, unless she's smuggling drugs I don't know about, you know, doesn't have any cargoes on there. All she's showing is that like, she's an example of a life that can live like off the grid in that way. And so that's important. She's important as a life, but she's not, again, like a major cargo and a ship carrying lots and lots of people, which is kind of goes in line with my surfing example, where like, it's still important for you to be the captain of your own ship. Like
Mhm.
the better that you are, so like you can increase your own joy and flourishing. And as like a political actor in the lineup, you're more capable of sharing if you can see the conditions for sharing. And like, yeah, the more sessions you have where you don't cause harm, the better. Like, I'm trying to think. I'm not a perfect political surfing actor, but I've never hurt somebody with my surfboard ever before who wasn't me
Right,
with my
right.
own surfboard.
Yeah.
But I've never hurt, like, yeah, been surfing my whole life. And there was the one time I don't think I hurt him he hurt me far more. I've told the story before. When I was 12, I took this wave in front of a guy in Santa Cruz and I did a cutback into his shins. But then he waterboarded me. So I think that's probably worse for a 50-year-old man to waterboard a 12-year-old
Mm.
than a 12-year-old being excited and like, you know,
Mhm.
running accidentally into an old man. But I mean, I never did that again.
Yeah.
But at the same time, anyway, I haven't hurt somebody with my board before.
Or waterboarded anyone.
And I've never waterboarded anybody, nor would I think that was like, but this is the thing that I am constant. Like, I mean, this is a
It's
little
like
bit,
the funny, not funny thing. Like,
yeah, it's just, it's actually the really like rough thing that being a small masculine person that like women don't get in the same way, where like a guy's gonna want to waterboard you, but he's not
Yeah.
going to do it because he knows it's
Yeah.
bad. But
Yeah.
if you're a little guy, it's like, oh, you're the perfect, like,
Mhm.
you're the perfect thing for me to take out all of my hatred on the world on, because like you're everything that like I hate, you know. So in a way, like a small man is like, in a weird way, like an appropriate way for them to act out their misogyny. Because they're not going to do it to a woman, but they'll do it to a small man who they perceive like effeminate. So
Yeah.
that's always fun. No, that was super traumatizing, but I think that the stakes though for like you being your own sailor in the surf and also like being good at surf forecasting is that like you get those conditions where you don't have to get in these rough political situations, right? So like you minimize those situations and you minimize harm to yourself and to other people, and that's ultimately a good, right? There's no like that's like against the cultural relativism, like across cultures, across times. Like this is the point of, this is like one of the overarching points I think of the book, is that we can find that it's a weird like argument against cultural relativism, which is like there are better ways of doing things across cultures, and it's super hard to figure out what those are and to see them clearly.
Yeah.
Because there are cases too, for example, where you might need to be more culturally relativistic to get to that good. But there are others where it's like, no, look, like the overarching point too with this whole justice thing has been to minimize harm. And to like,
yeah. I feel like so many different cultural norms stem from like the environment, like they're different environments, like cultures that have a very loose relationship with time are cultures where typically things change on the fly a lot more. You need to really be able to be flexible, adaptable, like maybe there's going to be an infrastructure issue or like something else. And so you like need to,
or it's warm all
that
year.
Or like cultures that have like really high levels of intrinsic communication are like typically a lot more isolated, and so it's like being married to someone, like you just start to understand each other much more deeply and like in a much more nuanced way. Japan is like a great example of this versus cultures that like haven't had that. Like it's not necessarily I don't know if I would say intrinsic or extrinsic is better, but different conditions created like different norms.
Right. In such a way though that like
Like, how do you decide which is better?
Yeah, I guess I just
If you're
hate
gonna say one is like there's like an objective.
yeah, I've always hated relativism for like well, I mean to a degree just because it was I think for more obvious
yeah,
more
that's a
obvious
good
reasons.
point. Yeah, I just read it.
Oh my oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was funny reading that. I was like, this sounds like, I mean, to be honest, at first I was like, this sounds like guys talking about parallel parking, but that's like not, it's like not teachable. But also actually it is very resonant to like, yeah, I just,
I mean,
well,
I think it's
surfing.
right. I think it's right that you're pointing to it in male culture because it's the thing of like guys mansplaining to other guys.
Yeah. Which I guess I don't witness or
Yeah,
the
I
audience.
didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah. But
I mean,
I have actually, I might have seen it in the water actually.
no, you have seen it in surfing if you've surfed at all.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm like, I actually don't know if that guy has any idea what he's talking about. Like, it's just hard to detect the bullshit when when
Yeah.
I'm still a beginner.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
No. So that's where I was thinking, like, so as somebody who teaches surfing, the stakes are higher for me to be a good sailor of myself and of the little ship that I'm captaining. Because if I'm saying that I'm a teacher of like ways of doing things that are supposed to increase joy and minimize harm, then like the stakes are pretty high for me to get it right and for me to be getting the information across correctly. And then also it becomes a burden upon me that like people know that I'm a teacher of this thing. So they're going to accuse me of sophistry and not getting it right and not teaching the right way if I, do something wrong. Right, which I do things wrong because I'm human and I make errors and I can't see. I'm not all seeing. I'm better at wave judgment than most people, and I, for the most part, don't burn people, but I will make judgment errors still. Because that's part of being human. But I will also now have grown up enough to like apologize. But this is where this when you have a bunch of people who, this is what I want to say. You could have surfers that are really good at surfing, for example, and they could potentially be good at teaching surfing, but they have enough power already that like they don't see enough and they're not good at philosophy, right? So like being good at philosophy would be the like master skill. And anything else, piloting a ship, surfing, government, data analysis, being a lawyer, being a bus driver, whatever it is your other skill is, that's secondary to the philosopher's skill. So like in a completely just society, like most people first would do philosophy. And the other thing would be like a little passion project that like also their philosopher self would be like, I'm first and foremost a philosopher, but and then secondly, I'm a bus driver, and thirdly, I make money. Because like this is the conditions under which like I live, but it's and the philosopher self of me is like, I get pleasure driving my bus. It's totally like I get these kids to school, but the stakes are high that I get them to school. So I'm going to take all my exams and take this very seriously. But you get the corruptors. So in this telling in book 6, the people that are the most dangerous are the ones that have this power and this potential to they have a philosophical nature in them, but because of the way that they're positioned at birth and like some of the other skills that they got, they are leaders of one society or another. So you can have more and less corrupt captains, more and less corrupt surf school owners who don't care really about giving the right education so long as they get all the money and consolidate all of the power. And they're the most dangerous and corrupt political actors in any environment because they don't do what's good. They don't minimize harm. They actually maximize harm for the perceived benefit to themselves. They're not actually benefiting themselves either, because then they go out and surf and people crash into each other, and then they complain that the lineup is chaos, and the way that they have structured their business is causing the chaos. And they don't see the incentive. They would have to take like more time to educate themselves on how to educate, which is going to like take time away from doing two very selfish things. One, just making a shit ton of money, pushing people into waves.
Yeah.
Two, surfing for yourself and your own enjoyment. And so
hooking up with all the hooking up with this
and hooking up with all the students.
Just the students are
oh, I've heard about a van that gets parked under the BQE.
Oh, I'm like, even my international trips have been like that. I've just like gone to like surf
Oh.
and it's literally been like, I mean, whatever, everybody's consenting adult, but it's just like, I'm like not really here for that. And I was
Oh
like,
my gosh.
yeah.
Wow.
I just see it, like from afar.
Yeah.
And actually when I was starting my business, and so funny, my brother's like such a player, but like never, he's coached with me before and never hooked up. Like, yeah, we've always had a law, never hook up with clients law. And I've always tried to be like the complete opposite of like all of the surf schools. And in that way, I was like, there's no need. There's just no need. And I never really had too many people working for me except for my brother, but yeah, but all my friends, I don't know what it is. Maybe we're kind of from a more, even though my brother's married now and my best friends are married, we've all taught surfing, but like, yeah, everybody ended up like marrying non-surfers. And he swipes a boogie boarder, but he didn't teach her. She's Brazilian. She came good at boogie boarding. But
That's how she came.
that's how she came. That's how they met. I think they met in Brazil. But she's like really good at boogie boarding, and she gets
Cool.
now too.
That's fun.
And yeah, anyway, it's pretty funny though. Like my generation from my beach, like we're not those kind of guys for whatever reason. Like all of us, like it's weird that like a whole little I think it's actually because the guys like 5 years older than us are so sleazy that like as little kids we saw them, and for
like
some
off-putting.
Yeah, well, we didn't want, I don't know why, like some of them we wanted, I think, well, Heath and Luke are really Christian. And then maybe like me and Andrew Dolan were just like teased so much by them that like that didn't make us want to be like them, I guess. I don't know, but like anyway, all of us like kind of treat our partners really well.
I feel like the like
I
hookup
think
thing.
we saw a lot of bad.
Yeah. But I feel like, isn't that usually also people who party a lot?
Yeah.
It's like a different lifestyle.
It is the party lifestyle. Yeah. It is. And I was going to say that too, like Heath and Luke are really Christian, so there wasn't a lot of drugs and drinking for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely, I'm introverted. Andrew Dolan is introverted. And then my brother's the party lifestyle guy.
Yeah.
Which is why he, but he had kind of good boundaries in terms of like at least clients with surfing, maybe not with like waterfall tours in Costa Rica. And actually he is married to somebody he hired. So my brother's, the party guy is the guy that he ended up marrying somebody that worked for him once. Yeah. So there you go. Party lifestyle. I mean, and that's what this book is talking about, that though, right? Like it's talking about like, why are the masses, why like, and that philosophy is not to be blamed for the degeneracy of the minority or the majority. And the majority of people like think that pleasure is the ultimate good, and that partying, like that anything that's not partying is not fun. Like how could it possibly be fun if you just don't do what your lower desires always desire? If you don't give in to like greed and lust and the things that sound like the Catholic 7 deadly sins all of the time, sloth, then like that's not fun. That's like not fun to be an ascetic. It's not fun to just like work out and eat healthy and read books and talk to other nerdy people about books, like, and think about ideal political situations. Who wants to do that? That sounds terrible. You're not drinking. And this part of the text, I actually, I really like, starting at 489E, where he says that philosophy is not to be blamed. This is how it works.
Yeah.
Is that there's these actors that they're actually pretty powerful. They're pretty smart. We would be stupid to call these people stupid. They're not stupid.
Yeah.
They're corrupt. And they are smart enough to do a lot of things to pull the wool over their own eyes, first of all. Because they make choices that aren't that cause more harm for themselves and others, and convince themselves that it's for the good of everyone. And that's how they get people to go along with them too. And it's super convincing. And then they make the philosophers look like navel gazers and good for nothings, and people that are just trying to get us to think and talk all the time and not actually do anything. And that's why Socrates is going to say that the corruption of philosophy and science and wisdom is more likely to come from those who are in power and those who have the capacity for power. So we shouldn't really blame the small people that like go along with these people.
I mean, it just makes me think of business a lot. Like, I feel like I literally have this conversation with my team. Like, our analysis needs to be actionable, not academic. Like, if you think this is like an interesting question to answer, that doesn't mean it's worth doing. Is it going to drive the business forward? Yes or no? And we have to like tell people not to just do something because they think it's like interesting and like more nuance, because that is not what we're paying them for, frankly. But it's like, I feel like business and capitalism like forces this like redirection of people's like skills and interest towards these like corrupt endeavors.
So what you're saying is that you feel the impetus coming from the business world that is focused on making profits.
Yeah.
Is that reflection
it's like
gum up, like something that you find interesting is going to gum up the works. It's going to decrease the profit because
like it's if you want to be employed, you have to be like contributing to like the business's profit ultimately. And I think to some degree, like that's probably what's happening here. Like people are like, pushing these people who are like smart and reflective into politics and whatever for personal gain, because there's an element of survival there. And I think it's like the same now. Like in many people's cases, their employers are like forcing this, but the fact that they're even going to those employers in the first case are forcing this. Like most people don't have the luxury of just sitting around and doing like pure philosophy.
So this is where, he says in the political realm, like the stakes for them going against these people are so high. You're compelled, right? So like in the political realm, it's like death or loss of rights, right? You like if you challenge them, you go to prison or die. So
in the business world, it's like you'll lose your job.
Which is a loss of ability to accumulate resources for yourself and for your family, which is a kind of death. And that's like, it's a super high stakes for not going along with the status quo. Even when deep down, like this could be better, right? And that's why Socrates throughout this thing is saying, he's like, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying it's improbable. Like we can still think it, we should think it. It is an ideal. and because we're capable of thinking of the ideal, it means that the ideal can exist because we can think it.
Mhm.
But it doesn't mean that it's all that, like, yes,
Yeah.
I think in this book, he really kind of lays his hand out of saying that, like, okay, it is very messy. Like, we've been doing the dialectic, we've been going this way and that way, putting up these categories, tearing these other ones down, developing this whole new breeding program. But like, are we saying that this philosopher class of guardian people in a perfect city is possible? And he's like, well, it's not totally impossible, just highly, highly unlikely based upon like what we see of human nature, and highly unlikely for a specific reason, which is that all of the people most fit to become these perfect philosopher people are the most corruptible, most evil ones that like are actually making an error of judgment. And it's like almost like on a this super thin line of they're just making this one judgment error about a perception of needs, about a perception of like what's better for them and what's like okay, put it in the terms of the dialogue, what the good is.
Yeah.
Right. So they're misperceiving. Sometimes in my language, it's this difference between an attitude of an abundance and an attitude of scarcity.
Scarcity.
Yeah. And so like the good is that there's lots of it and it gives off of itself and you actually don't need to hoard it. You can think of better ways of distributing it. And also, if the good is reflecting and like doing exercises and eating healthily, then you do need time for that. So you need to not be a slave to something. And so you would need to create like this perfect Marxist communist world where like in Marx's vision, it was not friggin' Soviet Russia. That was not Marx's vision. Marx's vision was poetry and fishing. Like it was more like that. It was more like sitting under plane trees talking about, you know, beautiful sun rays and like actually doing science. You know, this is what this is where this is going to, is that the, you know, because we're now going to be like, what's the real philosopher? What do real philosophers really do? Number one, math. And that's not the number one skill that the philosophers have, but it is a precondition for being able to do philosophy. Because math is a skill that deals in formal essences. It deals with formalizations of the figuring out how things are in a way that they might not seem to be. So we can see circles and squares in nature. We can see ellipses. We see all these geometrical shapes, let's say stars, tetrahedrons, all these kinds of things. And like science will progress way beyond where even Plato and Socrates are at right now in this dialogue. We can now see like all kinds of different kinds of shapes at the molecular level. We can develop telescopes that can see into outer space, and we know so much more about particle physics. So like, it's just that those we have separated off into expertise, like the scientists and the political realm, even though we also see how politicized science is, always has been and always will be, because the issue with science is truth. The issue with science is a foundational, fundamental ontology that you either agree with, debate about, or like throw out of the window altogether. And this is again to the relativism of values, is like you can have a metaphysics that believes in a God, and for you, you can either fit particle physics into that metaphysics or you cannot.
Yeah.
And that could have a different ethical outcome on the way that you view something like tribalized violence. You know, and so like the best case pie in the sky scenario is where like all of the religious zealots in the world also accept particle physics and are like, you know what, this is a cultural belief. I'm not really inclined to like you because you wear your beard differently than I do, but like, I can see that the God I believe in is ultimately all of these particles. I just need to do these religious things in this way because like that's how my family has done them for thousands and thousands of years. I need to use this language. And like deep down, I do want to kill you. And I really do think you're wrong, but like I can dig in there and see that like we're both human beings. It's all particles. There's still violence in nature, but like I think I can hold back from murdering you for one more day. At least a day. Maybe and not maybe a few generations would be nice. Because if there's justice, there's less harm, right? So I think that that is like, there's less privation and there's less harm. That's the overarching, like, they're very clear that tribal warfare is going to happen and that you need to be able to protect yourself for a basic sense of homeostasis and striving to stay alive. Like, I think there's a way in which like being ready for war is just a pragmatic, like, oh yeah, of course. Like there are bad actors out there. And if you do not like have a plan for what you're going to do when the bad actors come try to like fuck with your shit, like that's dumb.
You're going to lose.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's such a, I mean, yeah, I guess we've talked about it a little bit, but I feel like that's a whole course is just like the place of violence in this book and his
yes. Yeah.
ideas. And like, obviously there's, yeah, I guess there's necessary or like justified violence, I suppose, but there's, and he would say that there's like unnecessary or unjustified violence, right? But then, or like, I guess, or is it just that it's political violence is very different than like interpersonal? I guess, I don't know.
I think the answer is to be a philosopher to the best of your ability. I mean, the answer is that like, so if we go here to this divided line thing, which is the kind of the different ways of knowing, basically. And so this is what makes me, I'm like on this, like, wow, Spinoza is a Platonist, like, wow. Because this is what Spinoza means by seeing more clearly. So Spinoza has these ways, I mean, I could talk about the divided line and not bring in Spinoza, but Spinoza is the way that I see this. So Spinoza has these ways of knowing, also four main ways of knowing. And the first, ab experientia vaga, where you just like are taking in, it's your sense perceptions, you're just taking in stuff. And that is a kind of knowledge. But like, if we're talking about clarity of vision, which is also thematic here, right? We're talking about this, talking about clarity of vision. And that's what Spinoza is also talking about, clarity of vision. That first kind of knowledge is a kind of knowledge. That's actually the kind of knowledge that most people are operating from. Well, I saw it in this way, you know, but you're not taking into account anything further than the way that the things are impressing themselves on your senses. So it is the start to knowledge too, because you can't embark on the rest of the knowledge except through the senses. That's where we start. That's our starting point. And if you're blind, you know, it's proven your sense of smell gets stronger, your sense of hearing gets stronger, like the other aesthetic components of yourself are going to get stronger in view of one being not there or weaker. So after that is the kind of knowledge. Oh, I'd have to. After ab experientia vaga is ex signis. So then you like learn languages from signs. So you learn pattern recognition, right? Like I learned that a thing that has branches and leaves, my culture calls a tree. And I learned a thing that barks and has a little waggy tail is called a dog. And so that's another way of knowing. It's from signs. I learned to drive a car and the yield sign, maybe I obey it, maybe I don't, but I know it says yield. I'm not like supposed to yield. Whether I actually do or not is a different question. And then there is the reasoning where you're starting to weigh, right? And so this is the more mathematical, this is the part of the divided line where this is science. This is where you're taking that recognition of things in the outside, the aesthetic impressions, and your ability to recognize signs and to do pattern recognition, which like all people can do. and all people do. So to give like the masses the credit, you know, and I think that there's a big like laurel branch handed out to all of the people for give them for they know not what they do. They have some wisdom, right? But seeing behind, right? Because the next book we're going to go into the cave, seeing like asking like how this word came to stand for that, like going that one step further, right? So math teaches you to go that one step further, right? That you develop proofs for why this angle of this triangle goes this way, and when it does this, it goes that way. And you know, in ad infinitum with math proofs and science, to the point where like the thing no longer holds, and then you have to change the equation because like after you do it so many times, it doesn't bear out. And actually already that kind of hypothesization, testing, and then reality confirmation, that the scientific method, that is the start of doing, that's like the bridge between science and philosophy. And then the dialectical science, and for Spinoza, this is the one that will lead us to this amor intellectualis Dei, or the intellectual love of God, is that you start to see how all of this stuff fits together in the larger picture. And you really start to see like most clearly like the limits of your own knowledge. And that's, you know, what Socrates is always on about. I don't know anything. Well, now I don't know this. Like I can go math up into this point of uncertainty, right? Where like now we have, you know, let's say quantum physics and statistical mechanics and things like that, where like we know that like certainty now is like realms of probability. And then the thing that I was talking about before of like this Bayesian statistics and always like updating your priors, right? So like the ability to dialectically reason is the ability to, that's why the philosophers need good memories, because you have to remember what your priors are. You have to remember what the belief systems are that you're holding, that you're checking all of this stuff against. So the most noble kind of knowledge that a real philosopher would have is the kind that is always checking her priors and updating her belief system constantly to include math and all of that stuff. But then like when a proof doesn't hold, or when it has like really problematic like implications for political violence, she might have to like update these conclusions and the equations that got her there. But that's not going to do the updating through the math, right? The updating is going to be through that kind of rational reflection where she's seeing like all of the implications that come out of this way of systematizing and categorizing things in the world. And so the part of the divided line is kind of like Spinoza's 4 ways of knowing, where the big part is that just base sense impression, pattern recognition. And then it's the smaller part is, you know, the ones that are used less, because I mean, I think it's fair to say that like there are fewer people that see the value in doing the 2 upward kinds of intellectual training, let's say, where it's even those kinds of, I would argue, and I've always argued this against like the history of philosophy, and this has a little tinge of that too, which is to me a little Pythagorean and a little pre-Christian, where I do think there's a flaw in that upper reasoning if that upper reasoning starts to get so self-important that it disavows the body. And I always would want to be on guard of that, that idea that like you could live a life of the mind or something, and that the life of the mind, like, I don't think that if those 2 upper parts are functioning super well, you would disavow the body. Quite the contrary, you would take extra good care of the body in which those things are situated so that you could keep doing that stuff and keep giving more, you know, because that's the part of you too that's going to realize, again, I'm going to be Spinozist because I am Spinozist, that you exist sub specie eternitatis, that you exist under a species of eternity, and that like even though you have a finite life, we are communing with somebody who's long dead. And some of the things that we think and we say and the practices that we have, we might feel ourselves to be small, but they could have great repercussions for future generations. They do, even every little action and every little thought, you know. And if you actually like, that's where like self-knowledge and self-respect like blossom out to respect of like the larger social structure. And that, yeah, that's where like I am like, wow, like this text is so awesome. Like it's like this essential gesture that philosophy is worthwhile, like the most important, the most definitely worthwhile, especially this thing of like the constant updates, like constantly being like, what are my prejudices? Not being like, I'm this bad prejudiced person, but like being able to really analyze your prejudices and like analyze the things that you want to be the case. And I mean, even if like, right, again, this gesture is super nice in here. Improbable, but not impossible. It's a really nice thing for all of us, like political idealists.
Yeah.
You know, because like it means keep doing the work.
Yeah.
Even though it's improbable.
Yeah.
It's for me, it's therapeutic because I'm like, okay, right. Like we're not going to get all that we want. And actually like these patterns that he's talking about, like I'll get off of my high horse here in a second, but I was thinking about the danger of all of these smart people that get onto these confirmation bias things in terms of like here we go back to Twitter, the podcast world. And the people putting out like conspiracy theories and like really bad science. And especially even things about like diet. I mean, I'm really thinking of the whole keto world. Like, when are enough of these people going to die of like massive coronary heart attacks that this is debunked? And also like the climate science around getting that much of your, like if that many people only ate animals, it's like, somehow they have this worked out, this way to confirm they just want to keep. And I totally get that, like, if you can eat animals in moderation, it can be healthy in your diet. Better farming, all of that kind of stuff. I don't mean to say this as like but remember, what was Socrates' ideal diet?
It involved relishes.
No, that wasn't his. No.
Oh.
What was pre-relish?
What was it? Like lots of vegetables?
No, actually vegetables were like kind of a relish.
Oh, what was it? I know I'm like blanking.
Me too.
It was a meal that I called Jesus.
Oh.
Fish and no.
Loaves and dishes.
No, bread and wine.
Sorry.
Didn't they like only drink
Literally
wine mixed with water because the water wasn't clean? So they were always drinking like watered down wine.
It was either that or the wine was like practically fortified. It was so strong. I don't know if they had like, I'd have to read a book on like ancient wine.
In my like
it watered down.
In my sport and antiquities class in university, they said that they never drank water because it was like not clean. They always drank it with a little bit of wine to like kill the bacteria. So they were constantly drinking wine, but like low key.
So funny. I learned the basic.
Might be wrong.
No, but I learned the same thing, but for a different reason, which was they watered down their wine because the wine was too strong.
Oh,
so
it's probably a bit of both.
The same thing. The fact that they drank watered down wine all of the time. But you came to it from the water side, and I
Yeah.
came to it from the
Yeah.
wine side.
I mean, I don't know. That's just what that professor told us one lecture.
That's funny. Oh, that's
Yeah.
just bread and wine. I mean, like I could live on that for
Oh, couldn't.
Well, it was clearly Jesus's body.
yeah.
It was clearly like the divine substance.
Yeah.
God is bread.
Oh, right. Oh, I just made that connection, right.
I
But
mean,
also,
yeah.
if we think of it in terms of the gut microbiome, this saying that fermented things are divine.
Yeah.
I mean, they're both fermentation processes.
Right.
Wine isn't really the type of fermentation that's good for your gut microbiome, though. It like
I think
wipes
neither is
it
bread.
out. No.
I think bread. I
The
think bread,
relishes, though. The relishes.
the. I think bread is a lot better for people than they think it is. And then wine watered down, or like if you could hold yourself to one glass of wine, it probably has salutary effects. It's just
Yeah.
that like, yeah, the getting too drunk would be, it's a lot of sugar. I've already gone down that rabbit hole myself, drinking way too much wine in my life. But anyway, it is it is a vegan diet, bread and wine. The one that it's still probably not the best, but like, by his he could probably be convinced that more of the boiled onions and things like that were like a more necessary relish than lamb chops or something. But there could be a way like to have there could be a way for an omnivorous diet in an ideal setting to have all of these like, and this is what a lot of Greek sacrifices to the gods, they were barbecues where like the animal's life like was really taken seriously as this like sacrifice. Like there was like ritual and ceremony around the way that it was butchered and giving the bones and the fat to the gods, and like feeding a whole community on the flesh of like, it's far different than factory farming and like meat in plastic packages, and like where we have gone with like this overdeveloped need to just kill shit for our own pleasure. Like that is not like and I'm also thinking of like poorer cultures, like there's that book, The China Study, which is
I have that cookbook.
well, it's a cookbook, but it's also there's the book, The China Study,
Yeah.
is about the studies of the Han people and their diets, which are mostly whole food, plant-based, and they just have many fewer diseases present, but they're not vegan. It's just that they can't afford to eat meat. So like maybe like one pig gets killed a year and it feeds the whole village. And like that's the
It's like
meat
a special occasion thing.
yeah, that's the meat that they ate that year, was like the one symbolic pig, and like everybody ate it. And it's like very similar. I was listening to in Indonesia, they're like mostly plant-based out of necessity. And yeah, the people, if they're not smoking a ton, like technically live longer lives. But I mean, I think I'm saying all of this too, that there are like these like keto. I mean, I literally heard this one guy on a podcast say that like everybody should just eat how they want and all be on statins all the time. And that's really ideal, because like it's not the animal products that we're eating giving us high cholesterol and heart disease. It's that all of our like natural human cholesterol making already makes it our cholesterol environment. It's just wrong. It's just wrong. And it's a lot of these workout bros who basically, again, like this is the point, is that like somebody with a lot of power who sounds kind of smart convinced these guys, gave these guys a pseudo-scientific rationale for doing what they were already doing. And for continuing to do what they are, because they don't want to stop and they don't want to change. And they perceive that stopping and changing is going, again, this is this perception versus reality thing. Like they perceive that stopping is going to hinder them in some major way. And sometimes that's unconscious, right? That's sometimes that's like they will no longer be masculine.
Yeah.
Right?
The meat and dairy lobby are also like incredibly well funded and powerful.
and the pharmaceuticals. I mean, like statin
Yeah.
is a
But like there's a lot of just like really sketchy studies and things like that that are like funded by factory farming like companies and
right. I mean, that's like fast forward what Socrates is
yeah,
talking about, rich people who are smart enough with
yeah,
power
yeah,
to the big pharma
yeah,
and the meat and dairy
yeah.
industries.
Or like all the people who are afraid of soy because the molecule sort of looks similar to estrogen, but it's not estrogen. But
That
oh my God, it kind of looks a little bit like estrogen, and there's no science to support that.
no, and all of these things are playing off of the perception
No
of
quality science to support that. There's a lot of sketchy.
right.
Yeah.
And all these things are playing off of the perception that people have of what they desire and what is good for
Yeah.
them. And when it comes to like the larger political picture and justice, like if we just look in the you know, and in this way I would say that probably Canada and America like are more similar than different, which is that even if you guys have even if Canadians have like slightly better social policies, like the corruption in your government by like big money is still on, you know, similar to
It's
ours.
like similar but different. Like Canada loves a monopoly. Canada actually loves a like government run monopoly. It loves to protect monopolies. Like it's just it's interesting to see all the antitrust stuff here because like in Canada we're like, oh no, we love our monopolies.
That is totally interesting. That's totally interesting.
But is it the
Uh,
same when it comes to like, right? Because like we have like Citizens United and we have like all this like stuff where like money is like in politics just cannot be divorced. Like it's just, and like you can't run for office if you can't raise money or if you don't.
Yeah.
exactly. No,
Yeah.
no.
I went I listened to a really great lecture on like one of the most like influential uh political strategists in Canada. Like he's like the person that people hire to consult with. And he was like, the crazy thing is the skills that it takes to get elected, it like our version of the primaries, like to get elected to the party are like and to get elected to government are like completely different than the skills you need to like be an effective politician. And so you have like this weird thing. It's like the skills that got you there are not really what you need here. And so it's like kind of a weird system where like we're electing people who like can pack a room of people who are going to like vote for them so they can get elected to the party, but like not necessarily who know how to govern. So
I
like
can't think of any examples of that.
so but yeah, no, I mean you definitely have to be able to like, I would say it's similar. The thing that I notice most commonly between Canada and the US is like, because people, I think we have less stories of extreme, like stories of like racism and like these mass shootings and like things like that. Like we don't seem to have the same extremes. And I think it's just because we're smaller. Like we have the same types of people across the spectrum in Canada that you have in the US. There's just like more of them at the extremes in the US. And so there's like more of these like stories and things that happen and like movements. Whereas in Canada, there's like, it's just like a smaller group of people in those extremes. And so it's like less of a dominant factor in that same way.
Yeah, well, you
But
know,
it like we absolutely have tons of horrible people in
yeah,
Canada too. Like
yeah.
they're less powerful overall because they're a smaller group, because it's a smaller country.
Um, the guy Alan Bloom wrote this book
Yeah.
called The Closing of the American Mind,
Mm.
and I've started listening to it on Audible, and it's super fascinating. So I won't go into it right now. Like it's definitely worth a read.
Wait, the
But
guy who translated this?
yeah, he wrote a book
Okay.
called The Closing of the American Mind, and it's really, really good. And
Mm.
it's really speaking to me because throughout all of this time of um, political extremes on both sides, and I've been a little frustrated with just reactive politics in general, because I see that, well, basically I just see this like confirmation bias thing everywhere, and people being intolerant with one another and not patient with one another. And I totally see how certain people are impatient. And I'm even thinking like, even though I talk shit about like bad surf school owners, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't like have a conversation with these people, or even like press them a little bit and even be friends. I am friends with some of the people that I'm friends with. The
You
guy,
post photos of them like surfing.
yeah, and like actually I've become really good friends with Mike, the Mikes that own locals, and we've become totally symbiotic. We started off as like competitors, and like there's, you know, I used to like make fun of them on Instagram, the way they like teach their students to drag the surfboards by the leashes. And like, that would have been better if I had
Oh my God, it's wild.
that's so weird. It's still a very weird
Wild.
practice that
And
I
then
would.
I'll see people will have like rented a board from Breakwater and they're like dragging it on the beach. And I'm like, are they okay with that? Like, what are you doing?
I mean, so that's wrong. Like, and I actually like, I do want to fight against like a certain kind of relativism, because there are things that this is that my reasoning for why that's wrong is not to do with like Mike and Mike are bad and the students are bad for teaching people like that. That's not why. What's wrong with that practice is that it's treating the earth like it can contain another beat up soft top. You know, so like it's abusing the equipment, and it's behaving in a way that is not showing that you're interconnected. You're also doing a sport like that we're supposed to be like, you know, surfers get on their high horses about like being these environmental stewards, and like we are not, we are so like, our industries for our sport are so toxic. And that doesn't mean we need to stop doing our sport or stop buying toxic surfboards necessarily, but like, you know, I think it's a good idea if you get one to like use it for have it last for as long as possible, like keep it out of landfills, because the way that surf schools treat their boards is like, you know, and this is something the fashion industry is always, you know, is coming up against a big time with sustainable fashion, because fashion in the cycles that it is and the consumption that it needs is not sustainable. And the system, you know, more than anything, like capitalism is hard on a lot of people, but it's really hard on the earth in terms of like just not being able to sustain all of the waste and the turnover that needs to happen to drive the thing. And like it stunted our imaginations, you know what I mean? Like, so has democracy, I think. I do really agree with the woman and with Plato that like we have just decided this is where we stop. Like we don't evolve further out of this system. Like we've just decided like we made the best of all possible systems. And it's clearly not the best of all possible systems, this kind of republic of representative democracy that we have. And that doesn't, you know, mean that like I hate America. It means that like maybe I have faith that like
there's something better,
that there could be something better. It's at least we're doing that, you know, and that's the thing with Callipolis. It's just a thought experiment. He's not saying we're actually founding this city, but how are we going to even get to the highly improbable but still possible better political regime if we don't use our imaginations to think of these things? So we already see existing forms, and what can we do? What tools do we have at our disposal? Well, we can study human nature, you know, and like that's also why we've had other conversations where we talk a lot about psychoanalysis, because like that will become an outgrowth of philosophy. So I view psychoanalysis as like the medical practice of philosophy in many ways, where we're looking at like unconscious mechanisms, unconscious trauma structures, and trying to understand why people really, and assist them. I mean, I'm not a psychoanalyst, but like assist them to make better choices for themselves. Because often, as many philosophers say in many different ways, you know, Rousseau says, people put flowers on their chains. Spinoza asks, why do people desire their slavery as if it were their freedom, right? And here Plato is very much talking, and then we're going to the cave, where people are looking at the shadows dancing on the walls and thinking that that's reality. And whether there's some like ultimate thing in itself or thing or formal essence, the point is not so much that there's like a total formal essence that we may apprehend, but that like there are interworkings that aren't apparent at first glance without the process of reflection. And that a person who wants to do this process of reflection will be seen as a social malefactor is historically proven. Most people who push this issue really don't do well in business. Or, you know, and politically have fared like pretty, you know, actually, and it's funny because like the person is, this is something also to think of is like why these kind of great teachers, but I don't know, if you take a longer term view though, if you pull back sub specie eternitatis, I know who Jesus is, I know who Socrates is, I know who Plato is, I know who Martin Luther King Jr. is, I know who Gandhi is, like, so yeah, they kind of cut their acme off short in the sense, but they had such a huge impact and did such good work in when they were alive. You know, I know who Rosa Parks is. Like, we remember these people, right? Even though they like were persecuted and had hardships, and maybe you could see that like standing up for the truth, the reality behind the smoke screens kind of could limit their striving in a certain way. Like ultimately it opens the rest of us up to ask these big questions, you know, to like engage in this constant like question asking process, which will make other people, you know, uncomfortable, except for the like-minded kinds of people who want to keep pushing these things, I think.
I never thought about my old job that way, but like when I was representing asylum seekers, like the main thing that a lot of my clients had in common was that like they were like reflecting and asking questions and going against like an established norm, whether it was like female genital cutting or female circumcision or like any other practice that was like kind of like the norm at the time and or place or whatever, or still, you know, and then where somebody was unhappy, whether it was their immediate family members or the actual government, if it was like and then I mean, anyway, it's just like a very applicable description to like even like maybe not known people, but people who had to flee because of fundamentally either disagreeing with or just like asking questions and pushing back against those norms.
Yeah, I mean, even I think like a thing in itself, which that's where we're really going, you know, the next book is The Famous Cave. And so I was gonna like, I think I'm gonna watch the 49ers. I think that sports is the most appropriate place for violence, actually, so long as like violence doesn't erupt in the parking lot.
That's 49ers is football, right? I'm like, oh.
Yeah, the 49ers are playing the Cardinals in Mexico City of all places today.
Oh, wow.
But I just, maybe I'll scan this and send this to you guys, but like here, this is the Badiou book again, you know, his treatment. And here's the divided line that he draws in it. And here's this big part, what he calls, yeah, he has this very interesting like way of doing the divided line, but it has more to do with the little intricacies of each part of the divided line. But I thought the part that was more interesting was at the end, the Adamantis character he changes into a woman, Amantha, says, objective truth and subjective clarity are two aspects of the same process. So Yeah, and a lot of this speaking in fables makes me think of, so this book isn't about the Republic, but this is a really great book by one of my mentors, Drew Highland, and Plato and the Question of Beauty. And there's this one part that is so good. In the introduction, yeah, where he's talking about poetry. I think it is in the, actually in the start to the symposium. Well, anyway, that poetry and philosophy are these, like philosophy would be like the highest way of knowing, but that it's also the way that's built upon, that it's built upon poetry. So like the poetic register is going to be like the stepping stone to philosophy. So when we have all of these metaphors and parables of ships and the light and caves and all of the, like, you know, poetic flourishes throughout this text, that those examples that we're taking from the world of experiences are kind of like, there's a question of whether like the philosophy, like there's a poetic precondition for philosophy, right? So even though we've expelled the poets, which was maybe like a kind of comical, and it can be seen also reversely as like, that's how powerful poetry is, right? That's another way to read the expulsion of the poets from the perfect city, or at least it's not expulsion, it's censorship and getting them to tell better stories.
Yeah.
Right. So it's turning
State,
the poetry,
state-backed media.
yeah, but it's also turning the poetry into philosophy. Right. Or having things like noble lies, like these myths of metals. To what extent you can tell, I mean, there's a thing about essentialism that we should just consider more for next time, and just consider in general, especially this whole question of eugenics and being able to tell like whether a person is like bright from the moment they're a little baby or not, is an important question to ask, especially with this one person, one job thing. And I think it is also kind of an important anthropological and moral question in the sense, and social question, because we're having this crisis in higher education when like we see very clearly like some people, like the better way for them to be a philosopher is to be a car mechanic. They might not need to read, like it might not, their brain might not, maybe it is a question, are all human brains suited to this kind of, to like the highest kind of knowledge, even if every human brain like has that potential? Might it be better for people for whom that part of the brain just is more developed for whatever fucking reason, to like work together with other people that have that sort of brain to like make better structures that are like less harmful? Because like like making a social compulsion for everybody to go to undergrad is not really working out for everybody in our society.
Oh my God, especially with how expensive it is here.
That's what I mean. I mean, you're like basically setting people back before they even get to start.
It's crazy how like people's student debt here.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Wow, I can't even fathom it.
but I feel like that's like the other aspect of that question is, and like instead do you just like invest in like, not like logic for kindergartners, but like such a strong, you know, like, I mean, I guess it's his pre-K program that we're talking about, but it is like, because for that, it's like, yes, people have maybe like, there's, I guess I don't know about the like nature versus nurture, like essentialist stuff, but at the same time, it's like, I guess it does feel like we're trying to like make undergrad accessible, or I mean, we're not, but like that's just the wrong, like ideally we'd actually invest in like much more in like
universal pre-K.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, yeah, like that's, and like the thing is
Yeah.
like cities that have, or like I don't know if it's, I feel like there have been experiments or like some attempts to do that, and I guess is like, sorry, the broader point is like, do you then, like if you had logic, if like everybody took logic or everybody took like these like things that helped them develop their faculties of reasoning to a point where like they could access this, but maybe they're still better suited to like access this information by being a car mechanic rather than being like an academic. I mean, I guess then.
Yeah. The like education situation is interesting here. I think it's like very capitalist in that like to succeed in business, you have to effectively exploit something better than everyone else. It could be a very tiny thing. It could be your ad creative. It could be your product. You're in some way, like there is an element of winning. Like you're exploiting some component of your business better than everyone else. And like to succeed in capitalism, you basically have to do the same thing. And going to school used to be a way to do that, and going to post-secondary education was a way to like win in capitalism. But then everyone started going, and now it's not the competitive advantage anymore. And so the ROI is not there on this like crazy amount of money that people have to spend. And it's like when it was a way to differentiate, it was an effective strategy, and it's not really an effective strategy anymore. So if you look at the data, it's like we shouldn't be encouraging people to go to post-secondary. That's like actually not best for them anymore, for the average person.
No. And
but big education obviously wants people to keep going.
But also like, yeah, becoming academic too. There, I mean, the whole new schools on like the
Yeah.
system is, I mean, that's like a whole other thing
I
where
mean, I have some friends striking
at the new school. I mean,
but like adjuncts, and I mean, honestly, like grad students in general should, like, I feel like it's,
I don't
mean,
know. I have a PhD from the new school. I'm in grad debt from getting it because I'm just like, I lost my funding because philosophy was hard for me in the beginning, especially like logic and some of the, I didn't have a philosophy background. So I got like a couple of B pluses, and my GPA like dipped below the like level for my funding, and I lost it. And I was like, but I got far enough that I was like,
you want to finish.
I'm like, I didn't get in, like my reasoning was like, I didn't get into this. It's all government debt, I will say, which actually does make me feel better. Because they're not as vicious, honestly, as I don't have any private.
As long as you don't have to consolidate and go private, which I know a bunch of people that had to do that to lower that because they couldn't keep up with the interest rate. They had to consolidate. It's wild here.
The government, you go into like, there's no, you don't ever have to.
Okay.
So all your government debt is essentially also private in the sense that they hire private firms to manage your debt, but you owe the government. You don't owe anybody else.
Right.
So like, no matter what the interest is on your thing, like you can continue to talk and work with the government, and like, you know, like if it is, there shouldn't be a case where like your government debt is now taken on by a predatory lender. But there are people who get loans, and this is more common in undergrad than graduate. This, like, most people don't go into debt for graduate school, but in undergrad, they get the predatory lenders like Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, and they are ruthless. They will stop at nothing. They will destroy you. So like, you shouldn't be in debt to the government, and you shouldn't be having these negotiations with the government about the fake money that they gave you to go to school. But that's fucked up, and it's on its own. But it goes through. So I've heard this really good argument that like the very power of the American government is that nothing gets done. The very power of the American government is that the bureaucracy is so overloaded and there are so many cogs and so many wheels and so many papers to push through so many holes that nothing fucking happens, which is good. So like all of our deadlock congresses that we always get, which we have another one, like it's actually scarier for lots of people when it all lines up and one party gets to do what, even then it's radically inefficient and ineffective. And it's not that no laws get passed or no rights are protected here, but actually like it is harder, which, you know, obviously Trump was scary, but even look, there was this huge reaction against him. So like the way the pendulum, there is a checks and balance like built into our political culture, which equals to like shit not getting done. And then everybody's like, nothing gets done. And then the optimistic side is that like, well, aren't you glad that they didn't get all that done? And similarly for like, let's say we're all on the left, but like, when there are a lot of people on the right for whom like when we don't push our agenda through super fast too, they're like, well, they're not getting it, like they can, their anxieties can be relieved a little bit too, because like the left isn't getting everything they want right away. Ultimately we get more of what we want like long term. Like I was texting Noelle, I was like, you know, I've been alive since Ronald Reagan, and like the needle still has swung like overall, like if we're looking at a larger scale, it's still Republican president after Republican president, split Congresses, Democratic presidents. And one pattern I've definitely noticed in America is actually the Republicans drive us into a terrible recession, blame it on the Democrats. Democrats inherit a terrible economy, bring it back from like pretty much utter ruin. And then the Republicans get elected again and are like, didn't I do such a good job? And then tank it again. And then it just keeps doing that. So far, I've only been alive for 42 years. This has happened Clinton and Obama. And yeah, so like I'm on the third cycle, I'm on the third wave of like Republicans, always this thing, no taxes, like they have the same rhetoric, they have the same line every single time about like, and then they fuck up our economy and then they blame the Democrats, and then the Democrats just basically get this fucking shit turd economy because like Trump's the one that did the inflation, like Biden inherited the inflation and now we're having to at any rate,
stock market was way too good to be true for the last little bit of Trump's presidency.
I mean he like Obama fucking,
and now it's all correcting.
Obama inherited hell. I mean he got 2008. I mean that was really bad. We are close. It's actually happening right now. It's scary. It's happening right now, but it's pretty bad.
LA Bank, they like send an email every time the interest rate changes, which is like, I guess, you know, prime plus something. And so every time the interest rate goes up, the savings account interest rate goes up, and they send an email every time. And today I just got an email that was like, this is the 17th time we've increased our interest rate this year. Isn't that great? And I'm like, cool. So inflation's still going up. Great. Thanks for being my like tracker. This is wild.
I have Ally too, but I really like banking with them. Do you like banking with them?
I actually just have it as like a side account. I primarily bank with Capital One because it was the first bank that would let me open an account as an immigrant. I like actually really struggled to be able to open an account and like get paid from my company. Like I tried first with Charles Schwab and they were like, you need a local driver's license. And I was like, I can't switch my license until I can switch my car insurance. And I can't switch my car insurance until I can pay my car insurance. In the US, I need a bank account. Like it was like very nonsensical for weeks. And finally Capital One let me open an account. And I love them. You can manage everything online very easily. But Ally, I made for like a separate account, and
it's funny because you just named like I actually bank with all three of those banks. So my personal bank is Schwab. which
Okay.
they didn't let you, but as a personal for an American, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like seriously.
I did a lot of research and I was like, this is going to be what I want.
The ATMs are free everywhere.
Couldn't open the account. Yeah. And I want something where I can just manage everything online. Like I had a really great bank in Canada. It was a completely online bank, could do everything like sub accounts, like automations.
Well,
Like,
Ally is great for that. You can do all of the bucket accounts, and then
yeah.
Capital One, I bank with them for anyway. I won't explain this whole this crazy way that I do my banking for my business and personal
I love this topic.
oh really? Well, I do a system called Profit First,
Oh,
and
I'm familiar with that.
so I have all these accounts.
Yeah.
But
I have many accounts and automations.
okay, so Capital One is my.
I have one called Surf Coaching now.
I have Capital One as my income account.
Okay.
But I use an accounting software with my bookkeeping team called Zero with an X.
Oh, I know Zero, yeah.
And
I
Capital
used to use it with my brewery.
sucks. Its security is so good that I can't have a Capital One savings account, a Capital One checking, and a Capital One credit card all on my feed for Zero. One will cut out and fuck up all my books.
Oh.
So I can have one Capital One account.
Yeah.
Not multiple, where like Ally, for whatever reason, because it's an all online bank and it's set up for all online, it syncs like a dream. And so I figured it out finally. I had this one like for business points credit cards. I mostly use an Amex, but internationally not everybody takes Amex. So I always have this one business Visa card by Capital One that I would use when nobody internationally will take an Amex, but it would like fuck up my accounts every time I had to use it. So I finally got a Visa United card, which is.
I love Amex.
Well, I mostly only use Amex.
Yeah, will be brand loyal to them forever. Also, wouldn't have had a credit card in the US if it hadn't been of Amex's global transfer program, where they used my Canadian credit to open a card for me in the US because I had been with them for over a year in Canada. And that was the only credit card I could get for like 2 years. I even applied for a prepaid credit card and got denied because I have no credit from my bank, which could see how much money I had. It was like, it's very hard to get established in a new country. And I was like a white, relatively wealthy, like person. Like I just can't even imagine how hard it must be for like everyone else.
I have to tell you that everybody in my psychoanalytic, like redoing my relationship with my brother that I've tried to hire, like, or help me with Canades, have been socially positioned. Again, this is kind of goes to this, are people born with like a nature to get through life and others aren't? Like these, like to the extent of a guy my age, 42 years old, model walk for like YSL on the runway. These people, none of them who have helped me have figured out how to open a credit card. Like American citizens.
Wow.
Yes. And I'm like, I've had to walk all of them through. So get the prepaid card, buy your groceries on it, and then you establish credit. And they kind of have this like, that's stupid. I'm good looking enough that people are going to give me free things for the rest of my life. And I'm like, they don't say it in those words, but I'm like, you realize there's a timeline on this whole people give you free things for the rest of your life thing. And it's like now you're 40.
Wait, what did you hire them for?
They just kind of did what MG does, like a little bit of filming.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Like, I was just always straightforward. Like, I don't have like a huge budget. I can't pay somebody a salary, but like, if you're trying to figure out where you're going, like I can always help filming.
Yeah.
She helps me more than any of the male versions of her have helped me. I would say my brother's been a big help too, but it's like the trade-off has been like holding these people's hand to get them their first credit card, where I'm like,
Oh my gosh.
you should be invoicing me. You should be
Yeah.
this. You need to get an LLC. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
This is also like people on my team will ask me about like how do RSUs work and the stock options and like this and that. And I'm like, I just like anything I tell you is very biased by my views on personal finance. And I deeply don't want to give you any financial advice. Like it's very inappropriate.
yeah,
I employ you. Like,
I've been bad at those boundaries with
I
them.
need you to go learn this
Yeah,
somewhere else. Like I had
no,
someone one time, like I found out they like, so in Canada, your 401k, it's like an RSP. And I found out they were like probably 30 and had been saving, putting money into their 401k for a long time. And I found out they had never invested it.
oh, they don't do that for you in that job there? I mean, I have to
So
invest my
no,
own, but I'm a solo
so it's
entrepreneur.
different here. So here it's like very hard to have your own 401k, which I don't like because I like want to self-manage. You have to like go through whatever the company provides. You can't just open. In Canada, you can open your RSP with anyone you want. Like you have more autonomy, but also like some people open an RSP and start putting money in it and they don't understand that they have to invest it if they want to be able to retire off of it.
Okay, you know what this is?
It's very sad
It is a
when you
perfect
find that out.
segue for us to read book 7 about the cave, because right now with the financial markets crashing and us talking about the real versus the really real, and college debt and managing this kind of stuff, I think like next time, if we just like earmark it, like we should talk about the reality and unreality of value in financial markets. Is one of my favorite.
Yes, love this topic.
This is like giving me anxiety, but yeah, we can continue.
Well, it is actually one of my favorite topics, just because my point of going in to finish my story about graduate school debt, I was like, you guys, this is imaginary. Like, I'm gonna get the PhD, which you can't take away from me, no matter like how much you try to financially punish me for getting smarter, which I should be doing because it's a duty to society for me to get smarter. And like, I can't do it on my own. The new school fucked me over. But it's so funny for me because I would do it over again. Because I really like the education that I got there. I like the kind of teachers, I like the philosophy that they were teaching me, and it was worth it for me. And also like, I am a cockroach kind of person that's like, okay, well, this is putting a burden on me, but I'm gonna have to fucking figure it out. And like, if this PhD gives me anything, it's the ability to problem solve for these kinds of things, and like also see like the flexibility in the value systems where it's like you shift this to over here and you shift that to over there. And like, also I find that this time of financial crisis, any type of crisis moment is a moment to be creative, because it's putting pressures on you to adapt or die. And that's harsh, but we don't live in a very fair or free, nature is not by nature very fair or free. And yeah, so it puts these pressures, and we are these kinds of beings that have all these conventions, right? We have all of these conventions, and like seeing what thing is real or a convention, and is it a convention that needs to stay the way that it is, or is it a convention that's changeable? Like, what is in our power to change even our attitude about the convention, or the convention itself, you know, like women and men working out naked together in the gymnasium. So yeah, so I think that's like a pretty cool, I think we should think about this whole, I mean, the cave is about conventions, so that'll be fun.
Finally, the infamous cave.
The cave comes, book 7. All right.
I've heard so much about it.
I know. Well, we had to have the dotted line first.
Yeah.
First dotted line, then cave. All right, guys, have a great night.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Enjoy the